part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Good day, everybody, and welcome to a special Sabol Brothers on the Baseline podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Scott Sabol.
And I'm John Sabol.
Well, tomorrow, as we record this here today, June 4th, is the 50th anniversary of 10 Cent Beer Night. I know I have a T-shirt commemorating it. It was, we laugh at it now, but it was unfortunately, kind of a sad day here in Cleveland. But today, or tomorrow, we are going to have two special interviews from two people who were at that game and lived to tell the tale.
Yeah, and these are two guys that we've recorded previous podcasts with. Our first one was Dan Coughlin, former Fox 8 reporter and longtime beat writer of the Cleveland Indians and other publications, and wrote many books, as well as former Tribe manager Mike Hargrove, who was a player for the Texas Rangers at the time. Both of those guys, Scott, were present on the field and there covering that historic and infamous day.
Yeah, I believe Mike Hargrove was a rookie that year, wasn't it? Back in '74?
I think you're right.
And Danny Coughlin was definitely not a rookie back then. He was a veteran reporter all the way back then. But yeah, it's going to be a very interesting segment here, John. So we have this in two parts. Is that right, John?
We'll do two parts. First part, we're going to start with the legendary Dan Coughlin from a podcast you may have already listened to, but we recorded it on June 2nd, 2022.
10 Cent Beer Night.
Oh.
You take it from there.
Well, in my first book, I have a big, fairly long chapter on 10 Cent Beer Night. It actually started, and Pete Franklin had a lot to do with that. Pete was a big radio star here. He did the first major call-in sports talk show on 1100. Indians back then, everybody was doing 10 Cent Beer Nights. In fact, it was about the third or fourth that the Indians had done. Their first one was, I think, like 1971, and it was a Sunday afternoon over the July 4th weekend, and it was a charming event. They had like turn of the century bands strolling, guitars and banjos and things like that, and the straw hats and the colorful striped blazers roaming through the stands, and it was a beautiful, warm, sunny.
No issues.
No, none whatsoever. It was charming, and so the Indians were the first ones to invent this, and so other teams quickly picked it up because it was such a charming event, and so second and third years they did it. In fact, one of those years, I held a beer drinking contest with three or four old South friends of mine from the West Side, famous beer drinkers, and I there was an empty suite in the old press box, a booth there, and so I had a runner to keep running beers to these guys, and one guy drank 35 beers. The winner drank like 40 beers.
Wow!
Yes. That was good. These guys were good.
What kind of beer are we talking here?
I think that it was Jedseys. I think at that time I used the Jedsey in the book because I think Jackie York, the Indians promotion director, said that was their TD sponsor, Tennessee, and that's why they had Tennessee in the concession stands. Anyway, so this might have been the first time they did 10 Cent Beer Night, and it started with Nickel Beer Day. So this is now the first time they did it at night. And there was a full moon that night. And so Jackie York, recalling it, she said there was something different about the crowd. She says, every event we ever had, we'd recognize the same people all the time. Because if the Indians averaged 5,700 people a game, they were the same 5,700 people every night, counting them 81 times. So she said, there were people I did not recognize. A lot of young kids, college kids, like the former host of Meet the Press, Russert, Tim Russert. He said he had he was going to John Carroll at the time. He said he went to that night, and he had $2 in his pocket. Said the beers were 10 cents each. How many beers did I have? You do the math.
When did you know that trouble was brewing? No pun intended on the beer brewing.
Very good.
Very good. Write that down. Anyway, by the 4th or 5th inning, things were getting a little crazy. And by then, we had a couple of guys had ran out naked, slid into second base, got a hell of a strawberry. And one of the girls were running out there, lift up their shirts with no bras, flash the crowd. It was great. And then throwing firecrackers down from the upper deck.
Wow.
Into the bullpen. Firecrackers, hammer bombs, cherry bombs, boom, boom, boom's going on all the time. And this was getting louder, and fans were getting bolder. One guy, streaking was very popular back then. This guy, stark naked, jumped out of the lower deck behind first base and ran out, and he's now running inside the outfield fence. And he can't, back then they had coverings on the outfield fence, canvas, whatever. And what he can't see is there's the police running on the other side of the fence, but they're with their talkies. They're getting a report from cops in the upper deck saying, yeah, you're right alongside them now. Keep going right alongside them, but they had these huge garbage bags. And said when this guy then tried to jump over the fence, they were there on the other side with the garbage bag and put him in a garbage bag and dragged him off. And the fans cheered, dragging this guy off in the garbage bag. Did you know that they actually had a jail cell down in the bowels of the stadium?
We heard about that.
Yes, I saw it. It's a jail cell, a legitimate cell. Big old steel doors, bars, yes, put him in there. By the end of the night, they had a lot of people in there. You did not need a reservation. But it was standing room only in there.
But now what happened to you during all this?
Well, by the time it's over, and by the, let's go back just a couple more days, because a week before that, the Indians played the Texas Rangers on their beer night. And the Rangers beer night, their fans were pouring beer on the Indians players, throwing cups of beer at them. Pearl beer, or whatever kind of that Texas beer is, Lone Star beer. Anyway, it tastes like vodka. Anyway.
Well, beer back then wasn't very good in general.
Anyway, and there was an incident early in that game. And there was a fight. Oh yeah, the Indians' first baseman, John Ellis, got into a fist fight with somebody on the Rangers. And there were expulsions and things like that. After the game, Bert Grape, I think, was the coverage for the press. Bob Sudik, for some reason, a regular baseball writer, took the trip off. And so Bert Grape covered the Indians, and he quoted Billy Martin as saying, well, we're going to Cleveland next. You better tell your guys to get ready. So anyway. So all week, Pete Franklin on the radio is hyping this thing, revenge against the Rangers. Their fans poured beer on our guys. We had a fist fight there. And so the Rangers are coming up here to get even with us, but we're going to be right. Pete built this every night on the air. He had quite a following, Pete Franklin did. So anyway, everybody was in a hostile mood, let's say. They were arriving, many of them arriving already drunk at the game, drunk and hostile. So now that set the stage for what happened then. Oh yeah, so after the game, the game had been forfeit. We were going to win the game, by the way. And we were in the pennant race to that point. It's the ninth inning. We trail by 2. We get it to within 1, and we still have the winning and tying runs on last of the ninth. Tying and winning runs on base. by then it was something happened. The fans were out in right field. There must have been several hundred fans now milling around in right field, surrounding Jeff Burroughs, who was having a heck of a year, an MVP year with the Rangers at the time. And so now, from what Billy Martin saw in the dugout, which is lower, all he saw was Jeff Burroughs was down on the ground, and he thinks they're surrounded by drunken fans. And he thinks they're attacking Jeff Burroughs. They've knocked him down. No, what happened was the one fan knocked off Burroughs' cap, tried to grab his cap, but didn't get it, dropped it, and so Burroughs was reaching down on the ground to pick up his cap. So that's why Jeff Burroughs bending down to pick up his cap looks like Burroughs was knocked down. And so Billy Martin gets his "Let's go, boys." He comes charging out with bats. Here come the Rangers. And there, back then, I don't know, people might have said there were 1,000 people out there in right field, but realistically, there were probably a couple hundred. That's a lot of people.
Still a lot of,
in the middle of a ball game.
Right.
So they couldn't get. They had Herb Score go on the PA system, pleading with the fans to get off the field and let them resume the game. Well, by then, that didn't work, and they would not have been able to resume the game anyway, because all 3 bases had been stolen.
And never
Somebody left the stadium with the base under.
And from our research and talking to some of the Indians historians, those bases have never been found.
Right. Really?
But continue on that, because you got punched in the jaw.
Oh, yeah, okay, let's resume to that. Now, after the game has been forfeited, time has passed, they've turned off the stadium lights, all the fans have left, except for about a dozen teenagers standing on top of the Rangers dugout, demanding that they come out and fight.
Of course.
So I get with my official reporter's notebook clearly visible. They jump up on top of the dugout, and I asked them, what they're trying to prove. I said, these guys have left. They're on a bus back to the hotel already. And so one guy reaches from behind another guy in front of him and punches me right in the jaw. Didn't even stagger me. Kid wasn't, his feet weren't planted, he was off balance when he threw it. Didn't know how to throw a punch. I knew how to take a punch, I'd taken enough of them. And so it didn't even stagger me. However, I figured it's going to be fruitless to try to make sense with these guys, so I left. And over the years, I'd heard reports that I thought that there were a bunch of guys from Cathedral Latin, but later on I learned that no. But anyway, and I did get a name of a guy which I've lost now over the period of time. So anyway, I got punched, but no harm, no foul.
Hey everybody, it's Sam Amico from Cavs on the Break NBA podcast. Be sure to give us a listen for all your Cleveland Cavaliers recaps, analysis, breakdowns, draft talk, free agency. The list goes on and on. Give us a listen, Cavs on the Break NBA podcast.
What's up, everyone? I'm Holly Wetzel.
And I'm Tyrus Powell.
And we are your hosts of The Orange is Oranger, a Cleveland Browns podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network. We give you all the dog pound coverage that you'll need to get you through the regular season, hopeful postseason, and I'd say off-season, Tyvis, but is there really ever an off-season for this team?
Thankfully for our podcast, Holly, there really never is when it comes to the Cleveland Browns. Don't miss our breakdown of each week's matchup, game recaps, and any and all news out of Berea to feed your Browns appetite. As we know, Holly, dogs gotta eat.
Yes, they do. So hit that subscribe button and never miss an episode of The Orange is Oranger, Cleveland Browns podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network.
For the last few months, we partnered up with an Ohio-based company down in Columbus. It's called Homage. You probably have heard of this company or wearing some of their clothing. I know they sent us some shirts recently, Scott. I got a Cavaliers old school shirt in The old 70s script.
Right now, I got a Cleveland Indians shirt or a Cleveland baseball shirt with the old script C, from back old school, like 40s, 50s, early 60s. And man, does that thing fits great. Sometimes t-shirts don't fit right. This one fits great.
Yeah, you're pretty particular about how your shirts fit.
Yeah, I don't want it too baggy. Don't want it too tight. I want it just right so I can do a lot of things around the house and work out with it and what have you. And it's great material as well.
Yeah, it's soft on your delicate skin. That's for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah, they also have great Ohio State gear, Browns gear, any MAC schools that you or your kids or you're an alum of. Great partnership there. All you need to do is go to our show notes wherever you're listening to the podcast and click on the link that we've provided there. And that is your open door to all great Homage gear. And you'll like it. We love it and continue to. So we appreciate their partnership.
What's up, everyone? Chase Smith here, host of the Chase Smith Podcast. And my podcast reflects who I am. My hobbies, my interests, my passions, my curiosities, my careers, my questions, and my family. I'll spend time talking about all types of sports, movies, TV shows, trending news stories, and other cultural events, and even faith. This is who I am, and I hope I can get to know you as well. Join me on the Chase Smith Podcast, and let's have some thought-provoking conversations, only on the Press Play Podcast Network.
Now here's part 2 of our special 10-cent beer night 50th anniversary podcast with former Cleveland Indians manager Mike Hargrove. That was originally recorded on August 17th, 2023. Grover was a member of the Texas Rangers, a player back on that infamous day at Municipal Stadium.
Let's go back to the 10-cent beer night because it's just a day that lives in infamy here in Cleveland, but it happened, in other, maybe not that type of, the violence, but I mean, they had 10-cent beer nights in other places. So it kind of gets a bad rap because of everything that happened that evening. You were there. What do you remember from that stands out?
I remember, let's see, a few things. I remember that there was, you ever heard, Thunderbird wine? You ever heard of Thunderbird wine? Mm-hmm. They sold it in gallon jugs. Mm-hmm. I had an empty gallon jug of Thunderbird wine hit about 10 foot behind me when I was on the field. I kicked it off the side thinking, well, the ground crew come out and get it, but no, some fan jumped out of the stands, ran out, picked up the bottle, ran back and jumped back into the stands. And I'm thinking, well, I probably should. I'm gonna visit that jug of wine again tonight before it's all over with. That and the father and son that went and moved everybody from center field. The guy that streaked and ended up he had 2 black socks on. All he had on. He tried to get over the center field fence, and one of the guards jumped up to grab him, came down with 1 black sock. So wow. It was a mess. It started off small, people running back and forth between innings, between right field and left field, and it just grew. By the time the 8th inning rolled around, it was just a constant stream of people, and that's when it all broke loose.
How did everybody get out of the stadium? Players? Did you guys stay in the clubhouse until everything simmered down?
We stayed in the clubhouse probably a good 4 hours after they called the game, and then when we left, we had a police escort back to. We stayed at the old Holland House. And we they let us out and escorted us into the hotel and told us to go to our rooms and not come down until noon the next day. So a lot of us went hungry that night. So,
oh my goodness. Wow. We talked with former Fox 8 colleague. He still helps out on Friday Night Football. Dan Coughlin. You remember Dan Coughlin?
Oh God, how can you forget that?
Danny, we had him on our podcast last year. He covered that as a reporter.
Yep.
And he was telling us he got punched in the face by a kid. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm. You also wonder somebody had punched Dan in the face before that.
Yeah. Well, you're right.
And Dan's a good man. Yeah, it was. I heard that he got punched.
I think Danny's quote was, "Yeah, I've been punched much worse."
Yeah.
But he had some interesting stories from that night too. But it would just been crazy to think to be a player in that situation and then to see the unraveled.
It wasn't real when it just got bad. It wasn't scary. And if the Indians players came out and helped us, if they hadn't come out and helped us, I don't know what would have happened. But it wasn't scary until I got into the clubhouse, and then you hit the impact of it all hit you. And thought, it's a wonder somebody didn't get hurt really, really bad.
Yeah, can you imagine if that happened nowadays?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
So we're talking about, 10 cent beer night, old Cleveland Stadium. Do you have any stories about playing in that stadium from back in the 70s, early 80s? Because it was a strange place.
Yeah, it was strange. I just remember that's the only ballpark that I ever went into. I'd walk in the door to go to the clubhouse, and I instantly felt like I needed to take a shower. That's what, there's probably people that have real fun memories of that place, but I didn't. I didn't. I was when we got out of there, it was a good thing for us to get out.
John, it's crazy to think that this was 50 years ago, and it's amazing when we look back at all this. There's really hardly any video. It's all just snapshot pictures, which we go online, we see all this stuff, but really hearing these interviews from Grover and from Danny, I mean, honestly, hearing them talk about it's better than seeing the video, honestly.
Yeah, if there was really any video, you're right. I mean, all the pictures and firsthand accounts has just been incredible to be a part of. A sad day, and I guess you can laugh about it now, a half a century later.
Half a century later, yeah. What's so interesting about this is that I think Danny mentioned it, is that they did it like a month or two later, and they had no problem. So I don't know. I guess other people did it, but just one of those things we just have to kind of laugh about it and kind of move on and learn from our mistakes and kind of go from there.
And other teams did it as well. Unfortunately,
right.
Or fortunately, that is, has never been duplicated ever since. And that's something that you could never get away with now here in 2020.
Ooh. No, definitely not. And we're at one other quick thing. 25,000 people were at that game. That means that stadium was what? 25% full? Not even that. Probably like a third of it was full because it held 80,000. Only 25,000 showed up to that game.
And all the beer they consumed. It's funny, you talk to people like Danny and Grover. Well, Grover was a player, so he wouldn't know. But some would say, hey, they serve Strohs there. Or some would say they serve Genesee. I think it was actually depending on the situation or your seating arrangement at the old Municipal Stadium. Whatever section you were in, you got a certain beer. But, boy, it didn't matter what you were drinking back in those days.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us here on Sabol Brothers on the Baseline podcast. You can follow me, Scott Sabol, at Scott Sabol, FOX8 on Twitter or X. And you can follow me on Instagram at Scott Sabol, PICS. And you can follow me also on Facebook.
And follow the pod at Sabol Brothers. Follows yours truly at John_Sabol. If you haven't already, give us a rating, like, and subscribe. Really helps out the podcast, helps out our algorithm. Remember, once you do that, you'll get all the updated podcasts sent directly to your smartphone. Thanks for tuning in, everyone, and happy 50-year anniversary of 10 Cent Beer Night.